Hello everyone and welcome back to the Gym Challenge Summer Edition as we're continuing our very first debut into Regulation D. We're going into round number 2 here. I am Jesus Coronel once again in this commentator's booth, and for round number 2 on the screen, as we got the wrong one on accident, I'm sorry, on the left side is Brandon Davis with Armor Rouge, Indeedee Female, Glastrier, Sneasler, Fluttermane, and Bascule Legion. And for Hayley Aldworth, her team, it's gonna be Indeedee, the Gastrodon, Iron Hands, Amoonguss, Armor Rouge, and Mimikyu, all for her side. And the very unique thing about both these teams is that both of them rely on Psychic Terrain, and Psychic Terrain blocks priority moves, but each of these players have different aspects on how they play their Psychic Terrain. As we see on Brandon's side of the screen, he does have that Sneasler, which, if you don't know what Sneasler does, you're gonna find out pretty soon what it does, and you're not gonna like it. And as for Hayley, it looks like she's just using a normal Trick Room team with that Iron Hands and Armor Rouge up available, but also that Gastron. Very important to deal with that Bascule Legion, because if it gets into a position where it could go ahead and do some major damage, it could go ahead and use that Storm Dream ability, draw away things like that Wave Crash and the Aqua Jet that it could carry. And Brandon going to go ahead and lock in his team here. And I find the interesting things about his team is going to go ahead and beat that Glastrier and the Sneasler if they ever choose to come out. But both these teams rely on Trick Room. Now it's just dependent now on how these Pokemon are trained, because if these Pokemon are trained differently and can obviously accomplish different roles in their team, because they're trained differently, then you're gonna have to find out what's faster, what's slower, what's bulkier, etc. And we're gonna see from Hayley's side of the screen, we're gonna see Amoonguss Indeedee, and Brandon brings out the Sneasler with that Indeedee. The Psychic Terrain gonna go ahead and be activated thanks to that Psychic Surge ability, so no priority moves. Gonna go ahead and touch the grounded Pokemon, but it does activate the Psychic Seed onto the Sneasler, and this could be trouble if Dire Claw gets anywhere near grounded territory. And for Hayley's Indeedee, her Indeedee is going to have that Psychic Seed also be activated and increase the special defense stat to tank some hits. And as we see on both these teams, it's going to be very hilarious to see how this plays out, because Sneasler does start to knock out on the Amoonguss thanks to its acrobatics that it has and that Terra Flying now that it's consumed that Psychic Seed. But it can also go for that Dire Claw into Hayley's Indeedee and go ahead and go for a random status move. We're really gonna find out what's gonna happen, because Sneasler, a new Pokemon introduced from Pokemon Legends Arceus, gonna go ahead and be known as a very disruptive Pokemon to be using here. Indeedee for Brandon gonna go ahead and go for Helping Hand, make sure his Sneasler gets the job done with its attack here. Go close combat, gonna be the move of choice, and it is gonna be a one-hit knockout for that Sneasler. What a quick way to get that Indeedee off the board for Hayley. And Brandon now in an advantage, but let's see what the Amoonguss does here. It does go for the Spore, and it goes into the Indeedee. I'm considering, I really am thinking that that Spore could have went to that Sneasler slot, but you know, it probably is a little safer to go into that Indeedee to cover for a Follow Me in case it went that way, as we're going to see Hayley bring out her Iron Hands into the stream, into the battlefield. And now we're going to see a quick swap up from Brandis on his screen, go for that Bascule Legion, make sure that the Indeedee doesn't get threatened by a fighting type attack like that Drain Punch on the Iron Hands. But now it's just like, what does the Sneasler do here? Yes, you can go for that Dire Claw, but it could also just be easily redirected into that Amoonguss, and an Amoonguss does have that Rocky Helmet, so if it redirects a physical attack to it, it won't appreciate taking chip damage just for attacking. And we're going to see Indeedee just try to do something in its sleep, and we do see the Dire Claw being clicked here. And Hayley going to go ahead and use her Terrestrialization pretty early. It's going to be that Amoonguss going to go ahead and Terra type into that Dark typing. Dark typing making a bit of resurgence thanks to the Prankster ability being more prevalent than ever. And that's going to be the interesting part of this new format, as Terrestrialization options are now going to be different for every team. Rage Powder going to come in, go ahead and redirect whatever the Sneasler wants to do, but if it went for the close combat, which it did not do, that would have been very dangerous to experience. As the Dire Claw is going to go ahead and do that much damage, take a bit of Rocky Helmet damage, and I think it missed out on a status effect as the Wild Charge critical hits the Sneasler, and down goes the Sneasler Although I don't think that crit absolutely matter thanks to the close combat defense drop that it took. But it does give Armarouge a free switch in here, but thanks to that Dark Terra from that Amoonguss, it's not going to be able to land that expanding force onto it, so it's probably just left going for that armor cannon, but it is just going to go for that expanding force, try to pick up the knockout onto the Iron Hands. And that's pretty much all you can ask for right now in this match, other than that Sneasler fainting earlier. You know, you didn't get any stats effects from that Dire Claw before it fainted, but it did a considerable amount of damage on the Amoonguss. Probably is in armor cannon range. And as I look into the sheet again, I think I did see the Dazzling Gleam on Brandon's Indeedee. So he does have a way to touch her Indeedee or her Amoonguss now with that Dark Terra for super effective damage, though I don't know how much damage it's going to be dealing in the long term. UC Translation is going to be activating for Brandon's. Looks like to be the Armarouge going to go ahead and tear it into that grass type to not only potentially dodge something like that Gastrodon that it could be sitting in the back, but also it could potentially fish out a Spore for that Amoonguss. And he takes another turn of sleep, so that's, I think that's second turn of sleep that it's taking. Now Armarouge going to go for that expanding force, won't expect the Dark type Amoonguss, but it will hit the Iron Hands, and it is another knockout already for Brandon with two high-powered Pokemon. First the Sneasler, now the Armarouge with that Life Orb damage is going to be taking. There's a Pollen Puff. Probably did read a Terrestrialization. Going to go ahead and drop Armarouge down to half. And the Gastrodon is the last Pokemon for Hayley. And sadly for Brandon, he does not have Energy Ball on Armarouge. Although it would have been a little bit of a tall ask if he did have the Energy Ball, which is a different wrench you'll take from Armarouge from time to time. Sometimes you want Energy Ball, sometimes you want Heat Blade, sometimes you want Aura Spear. You really have so many options to go for that Armarouge. See what it can do in the battlefield. So Indeedee should wake up this turn or the next turn. It does wake up right now. Go ahead and go for that Helping Hand once it gets some damage onto the Gastrodon before it gets any setup going. Because you don't really want to take taking a lot of damage thanks to the expanding force now. Once again, boosted by the second terrain. How much damage is going to be doing? Another one-hit knockout thanks to that Helping Hand. Armarouge came to play, and I don't think this Amoonguss is going to take the knockout with that Pollen Puff, so we're going to find out right now for ourselves. It does take the knockout actually thanks to that Light Orb recall that it took. So it's down to 2 Pokemon for Brandon. However, this Indeedee does have Dazzling Gleam, so it does threaten this Amoonguss for a good amount of damage. And there is the Basculegion in the back with Ras Respects ready to go, but also that Wave Crash. Now that the reader, now that it's no longer a grass type, is able to do neutral damage thanks to the neutral typing between Water and Dark. And that's probably the game over here, as we're going to see Helping Hand once again from this Indeedee. Wants to make sure he gets the knockout with that Wave Crash. There it comes into this Amoonguss that's just translates into the Dark type. It is a one hit, it is another knockout, and that is the game 1 for Brandon for game number 1. As he takes the early lead in this round 2 game. Quite interesting to see that these two teams are very similar to one another, but Brandon got the jump thanks to that Sneasler's close combat hitting into that Indeedee, going for the one-hit knockout instead of something like that Dire Claw immediately. But now that I look into the teams again, I think, in my opinion, Hayley played that a bit passively. Where yes, you did play pretty well to your outs. Just at turn 1, you really did not have much of a play because you were able to spore the Indeedee. You were able to get that disruption going to make sure that Indeedee never gets a follow me off. Make sure you get that targeted onto the Sneasler from that turn. But it's just at the same time, did you get any trade-off from it other than getting Armarouge to sweep your entire team after the translation from Amoonguss? That's what really it came down to for that game. As we're looking at his teams again, for Brandon Davis, we have Armarouge Indeedee, Glastrier Sneasler, Fluttermane, and Basculegion. And for Hayley, it's Indeedee, Gastrodon, Iron Hands, Amoonguss, Armarouge, and Mimikyu. I had to wonder if Hayley considers bringing her Armarouge into this battle because Armarouge, even though it could just be left out in the open against something like that Sneasler or the Fluttermane or the Basculegion, it might be worth the trade-off if you just go for Follow Me Trick Room. Or, oh wait a minute, I just realized this Armarouge for Hayley does not have Trick Room. actually. So the Trick Room setters are actually just the DD and the Mimikyu for Hayley, so maybe we could see the Mimikyu come in. As both players now locked into their teams, we're going into game number 2 of this Gym Challenge Summer number 1 for Regulation D's first ever in-person tournament. We're gonna go see Mimikyu and Armor Rouge for Hayley, and for Brandon, it's once again the Indeedee and the Sneasler. So the Psychic Z is gonna go ahead and activate for that Sneasler. However, it has to contest with his Armor Rouge, which is expanding force is 4 times super effective. Yeah, 4 times super effective against that Armor Rouge thanks to fighting and poison typing. So Sneasler might be forced to go for that Terrestrialization into a flying type, or be forced to go for the Follow Me. Or yeah, actually never mind. Disregard that. I just forgot Expanding Force is both Pokemon, so Expanding Force still friends to knock out into the Sneasler. So now it just basically comes down to, I think I saw Brandon wanting to do is go for a Dire Claw, make sure that he gets a sleep or paralysis to potentially force a disruption play for Hayley as she wants to get Trick Room up, and there's the helping hand, the first move for Brandon. Wants to make sure the Sneasler does get a chance to get the knockout onto something. Goes for the Dire Claw. How much damage is it doing? He's not doing enough. It doesn't get into status condition. Here comes the Expanding Force, gonna knock out the Sneasler. Gonna kind of do a decent amount of damage to this Indeedee. Thanks to that life orb that it has and that Expanding Force boost to the Psychic Terrain. Probably a little bit of a fragile effort from Brandon. Wanted to get that Dire Claw off, but doesn't get it. A status condition on it as Mimikyu. That's a Trick Room relatively free. But we do see an Armor Rouge in the back for Brandon, so he could go for his own Expanding Force, and depending on how slow his Armor Rouge is compared to his Indeedee, he could just go ahead and go for Dazzling Gleam as well, break the disguise, and go for the Expanding Force, get a double knockout that way. So, very high octane offensive here. Wait, did I just see Brandon click Trick Room? Yeah, he does have the Basket Legion in the back, but you do have a double knockout presented to you, but it just depends on how you want to play this out, because Mimikyu cannot go for the Shadow Sneak. It could go for something like that Play Rough that it could offer here, but instead just goes for the Armor Cannon. Now that yeah, Armor is actually just slower than his Indeedee and Trick Room, so he goes to go ahead and get that Armor Cannon, gonna lower his defenses, break Mimikyu's disguise, and I think his Indeedee did click Dazzling Gleam from what it looks like. As Armor takes a bit of Life Orb recoil there. There's the Armor Cannon going into Brandon's Indeedee. How much damage will this do? It's a knockout. So when Hayley's presented the Trick Room option thanks to that Armor Rouge, he got onto the advantage. He really just got to do the advantage. That's crazy. Armor is going to take more Life Orb damage for Hayley, and the Armor Rouge for Brandon going to take a Play Rough to the face. Takes a decent amount of damage thanks to the defense drop, and now Brandon just down to his Basket Legion and Armor Rouge. Armor Rouge is slower than the Armor Rouge on Hayley's side. Expanding Force is pretty open to go ahead and get that knockout for Hayley, and that probably will put Brandon in a 2v2 situation that he wants to get right now. And here comes the Expanding Force, gonna go ahead and take the double knockout. Basket Legion, let's see what it can do here. It's not gonna get any attack off this turn, but it could get into a situation where if Hayley brought the wrong Pokemon, Basket Legion can just bring this game back, and this Armor Rouge could just, yeah, just goes for the last respects at 150 base power thanks to the double knockout that it took earlier for Indeedee and Sneasler. I have to wonder now if Hayley, I mean, if it's a Mungus Indeedee, if it's a Mungus Gastrodon, it's definitely trouble, but we're first going to see Iron Hands from her, and her other Pokemon she's going to sing is the Indeedee. So you can redirect that last respects to the Indeedee to make sure it's not hitting for super effective damage, but you have to consider your options with your Terrestrialization if you're Hayley, because you get the both these players get the Terrestrialize actually. Ooh, that really Terra Fairy onto the Basket Legion. That's a very interesting defensive typing there to avoid Dark type attacks, which Dark types have been on the rise lately, and yet we do see 2 turns of Trick Room left, as well as 2 turns of Psychic Terrain. So Expanding Force does threaten the knockout onto Iron Hands, but it can also Terrestrialize away from that into the Grass type, but that could also be read by an Armor Cannon. Decision time for Brandon if he is to come back into this game, and we're probably going to be seeing, I think we're going to see Wave Crash plus Expanding Force if I'm in random choose right now, and we're going to see a Terrestrialization. This is Hayley's Terrestrialization going in first, She's probably strategizing away from that psychic weakness. Is going to go ahead and change the Iron Hands into the grass type. So if it went for the expanding force, it does have a greater chance to survive the hit. But if it went for armor cannon, it will drop. And there is a translation up for Brandon as well. This looks like to be the Basque Legion into the fairy typing to avoid the super preventive damage and water type from that wild charge. And this is actually the first time I've ever seen Basque Legion go fairy type in all the times I've seen regulation deep battles from my own sense and from other tournaments. And there is a follow me going to come out, going to go ahead and redirect all attacks. And here's the wild charge into the armor rouge, going to go ahead and get that knockout. So yes, so now Last Respects is at base 200 power. But did he go for the wave crash is the new question. He went for the wave crash. Let's see how much damage this does into the Indeedee. This might be enough for a knockout. It is not a knockout, even with that critical hit. Even with the critical hit, is not enough for a knockout. There's one turn left to trigger. Yes, you can protect, but now you have to wonder how much damage that wild charge is doing, because wild charge, yep, oh yeah, especially with that especially with that helping hand as well. I don't know if Brandon's able to survive that wild charge from the Iron Hands, because if it's able to survive, it can just knock out the Indeed and go for Last Respects the next turn. But it just gets red again. Yeah, this comes down to a read, because you need to figure out if Hayley is going to go for another helping hand, or if she's going to opt to go for the follow me here. Because if it goes for follow me, you cannot go for Last Respects because of that normal typing. But if it doesn't go for the follow me, yep, there's a safe play. There's a follow me here. Now it comes down to whether or not a wild charge knocks out this Basque Legion here, as Aquajet going to go ahead and take the knockout into the Indeedee slot. So now you have a safe Last Respects to go for. How much damage is wild charge going to do? We're going to find out right now, and it is not enough. It takes 120 damage, takes a bit of damage to do recoil. Now Brandon has a base 200 Last Respects you can go for. Trying to see if this is powerful enough to take out the Iron Hands. It is not powerful enough. Hayley going to bring this into a game 3. On the brink of defeat, Hayley brings it back thanks to the Mimikyu and Armorer's lead. And now Brandon probably regretting not going for that Dire Claw. Or not really regretting it, but now that the luck's not on his side, thanks to the Dire Claw, both games have not inflicted it with a status move. So now we're going to another game 3 here. And this is really exciting to see game 3s coming in early on in the rounds, because anything can happen. Anything can happen. Somehow Dire Claw has not gotten any status conditions, and expanding force has been a big factor in both these battles. So now I'm looking back into these teams, so as we're going to see soon on the screen here, Brandon's team, once again, the Armor Rouge Indeedee, Class Tree or Sneasler, Fluttermane, and Basque Legion. It looks like Brandon's going to go ahead and go for a different gameplay here, probably leading that Fluttermane. And for Hayley, her team is going to be the Indeedee, Gastrodon, Amoonguss, Iron Hands, Armor Rouge, and Mimikyu. This is just going to be very interesting to see here from both these sides, because psychic terrain's been a big factor in both these battles so far, with that expanding force taking key knockouts into Iron Hands, Sneasler, and also doing major damage to that Indeedee for Brandon. So that's I guess that's a big difference between not having a psychic seed on an Indeedee, because that Rocky Helmet's yet to come in play. I know that Rocky Helmet's supposed to be something for that Earthshaker Rapid Strike that's been lingering around in this metagame, but it really hasn't been that much of an impact in this battle, because the only physical attacker that Hayley has on her side is going to be that Mimikyu and the Iron Hands. And we're seeing Brandon flipping around his team, and it looks like he is just going to more likely abandon the psychic terrain, because because even though Hayley had it in the back, she abandoned it early on because it could play around whether or not expanding force or psychic seed comes into play for either the Armor Rouge and the Sneasler. And Brandon coming down to time where he really is considering his options. He's gonna leave behind the Indeedee, and we're gonna see a Fluttermane Sneasler lead for Brandon. And I wonder if Hayley's gonna lead the Mimikyu and the Armor Rouge again, and have the Indeedee in the back and the ready. Well, we're gonna have to find out right now, as we're gonna get set into game number 3 here for the second round. It's gonna be Mimikyu Indeedee for Hayley, and we're gonna see Flutter Mane Sneasler for Brandon, and Psychic Surge gonna go ahead and activate that unburdened ability with the Psychic Seed being consumed. Gonna go ahead and raise the special defense, but as I see, Hayley's Indeedee, it does threaten a one-hit knockout thanks to having Psychic. But now, once again, Dire Claw comes into effect, but also this Flutter Mane's the first introduction into the series here with that booster energy. Gonna go ahead and boost up its speed stat. So this is a fast Flutter Mane here for Brandon, and as we're gonna have a look, it's pretty, and yeah, we're gonna see Dazzling come out. He's probably gonna go ahead and break guys that Mimikyu here, as we're gonna see Sneasler come back into Brandon's trainer and into Brandon's Pokeball here, as we're the Armorers come in, probably to take a Psychic. And here's a Follow Me here. Go ahead and redirect well, it's potentially going to be that Dire Claw against that Mimikyu here, as we're going to see the Dazzling do very minimal damage to that Indeedee and break the disguise of the Mimikyu. Mimikyu's disguise is going to be broken, but Trick Room gets set up. So now that Speed Booster probably going to be on the opposite end of Brandon, as now Flutter Mane is likely going to be moving last every turn, unless there's another Trick Room coming in from either side. But Armarouge gets in pretty safely, and there is a chance this Expanding Forces takes out Mimikyu and does a considerable amount of damage to this Indeedee here. So I'm really curious to see if we're going to see a knockout into this Mimikyu, because it cannot go for Shadow Sneak. It could go for the Polyruff onto the Flutter Mane, but it would need to underspeed something like that Armarouge here, as it does not underspeed. The Expanding Force doing a lot of damage to that Indeedee thanks to that critical hit. Mimikyu going down relatively easily, and we're going to see this Indeedee go for likely that Psychic. Psychic is going to go into the Flutter Mane here, as the Armarouge for Brandon go ahead and take a bit of Life Orb damage. Psychic doing okay damage. There's a Moonblast into the Indeedee, and that is a double knockout for Brandon. So the speed ended up not mattering here in this situation, but Armarouge underspeeding in Mimikyu, a big reason why Brandon is now up in this game with that Sneasler in the back, and there's the Gastrodon for Hayley, as it's going to be Gastrodon Iron Hands for her as her final two. So Expanding Force looks very good here for Brandon, as it could do massive damage to that Gastrodon, and also potentially force the Iron Hands to go for a Terastallization away from that fighting, from that Psychic weakness, or even the Fairy weakness from Brandon's Flutter Mane, because you don't want to be in a situation. This situation is really tough for Hayley, because she can potentially knock out that Armarouge with Earth Power or Wild Charge, but then you have to contest that Flutter Mane, because you really have to contest that Expanding Force for Brandon, because if the Expanding Force does too much damage to both your Pokemon, you're likely going to be losing the game, because you're taking too much damage. You have no way to get back your HP other than like potentially other outside items like Drain Punch or Leftovers on each side respectively. Hayley is going to go ahead and go for Terastallization. So go ahead and beat an Iron Hands away from the fighting type and go into Grass. Make sure that it doesn't take super effective damage from something like that Expanding Force, but it needs to be able to suffice, as we are also seeing a Terastallization from Brandon, and it looks like to be Armarouge to Grass to make sure it doesn't make sure that Wild Charge is resistant to it, but also make sure it avoids Earth Power from that Gastrodon. And here we go. How will this turn play out? It's going to be a Wild Charge into this Armarouge, not doing a lot of damage now that it's a Grass type, so it's going to be resistant to that Electric type attack. Here's the Muddy Water. Going to go ahead and that was really interesting that both Hayley's Pokemon was able to underspeed here, and we're going to see a double accuracy drop. Uh-oh, this could be trouble here, but the Expanding Force doesn't miss. Here comes the Expanding Force doing a great amount of damage to both Pokemon. Okay, the Flutter Mane does not miss an attack. Goes for that Moonblast, knocks out the Gastrodon, and now it is a full 4v1 situation for Brandon. Iron Hands can bring this back with those accuracy drops. It needs so much to happen. It needs to knock out the Armarouge to Drain Punch. It also needs to knock out Flutter Mane with something like that Wild Charge. Drain Punch is not even enough to take a knockout on the Armarouge, so now you're going down to misses from those accuracy drops. Will the misses even happen? Armor Cannon just gonna go ahead and connect, and that is game 3 and the match to Brandon Davis. He wins the set 2-1 with a convincing 4-0 victory after what looked like Hayley brought the match back, goes down to a very dominant Game 3 performance as the Armor Rouge goes down to its own life orb. But yeah, that just makes it not a 4-0 anymore, sadly. So we'll count it as a 4-0 in our books to the audience. But yeah, that's just how the cookie crumbles if you're playing against something like that second rank team. Because once Trickle goes up, you need to have as much offense as you can, and that Armor Rouge from both sides. The biggest reason why Armor Rouge was able to do so much damage, get so many knockouts, and tell you all, Ice Spam is still an archetype you need to be on the lookout for. Just because the ruined Pokemon exists doesn't mean that they have very limited usage, because Dark types are the only counter to Ice Spam because of the expanding force, and if you don't have any way to resist something like that expanding force, you are in a world of trouble. So get your counters ready and be on the lookout for that, as we're going to take another break. We're going to round 3 soon, and I hope you all just go ahead and stay in the stream. You don't want to miss out.